He sat in my kitchen, in my robe, and told me to accept the new arrangement. I smiled, nodded, and walked out. 3 days later, they realized the house, the accounts, the cars, everything was mine. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. The morning started like any other Thursday. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in thin golden stripes, cutting across the hardwood floors I'd personally selected 3 years ago when we renovated. Brazilian cherry, expensive. Leah had wanted tile, but I'd insisted on wood. It felt warmer, I'd told her, more like home. The coffee maker hissed softly in the background, releasing that rich, bitter scent that usually meant comfort. Routine, normalcy. I'd set it on a timer the night before, same as always. 7:15 a.m., precisely. The machine I'd bought after researching for weeks, reading reviews, comparing models, a small luxury that made mornings easier. I walked into my kitchen, still wearing the suit I'd laid out the night before. Navy blue, pressed, professional. I had a meeting at 9, a potential investor. The kind of meeting that could change the trajectory of my business for the next 5 years. And then I froze. Leah was sitting at the island, not alone. Across from her sat a man I didn't recognize. Mid-30s, maybe, clean-cut, like he'd just stepped out of a gym advertisement. Sharp jawline, confident posture. The kind of man who'd never doubted himself a day in his life. And he was wearing my bathrobe. The navy one I'd gotten for Christmas 2 years ago. The one Leah had wrapped with a handwritten card that said, "To my favorite man in the world." The one with my initials, M.H., monogrammed on the chest in gold thread. He had a cup of coffee in his hand, my coffee, from my machine, in my house, and he was smiling. Not nervously, not apologetically, not with the shame of a man caught doing something unforgivable. He smiled like a man who owned the place. I stood there in the doorway, briefcase still in hand, keys dangling from my finger. My mind went blank for a moment. Static, white noise. For a surreal second, I thought maybe I'd walked into the wrong house. Maybe I'd had a stroke on the drive home last night and was hallucinating. Maybe this was some elaborate prank and cameras were about to pop out from behind the refrigerator. But then Leah looked up at me, and her expression told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't surprised to see me. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't scrambling to explain or apologize or beg for forgiveness. She was calm, almost bored, like I was an interruption to her morning routine. "Mark," she said flatly, the way you'd acknowledge a stranger at a bus stop. The man in my robe, in my goddamn robe, leaned back in the chair. My chair. The one at the head of the island, where I sat every morning reading the news on my tablet. He stretched his arms above his head like he was loosening up after a good night's sleep. In my bed, I realized. He'd slept in my bed. He gestured toward the empty seat beside him with a lazy wave of his hand, like he was inviting me to sit in my own home. "Either accept the new arrangement, Mark," he said slowly, deliberately, like he was explaining basic math to someone who'd failed the test. "Or go." The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. I blinked. Once, twice. My brain struggled to process what I was hearing. New arrangement. What arrangement? When had there been negotiations? When had I been consulted? Leah set down her mug. My mug, actually, the one my brother gave me with "World's Okayest Husband" printed on the side, which suddenly felt like a cruel joke, and crossed her arms. "We're done pretending, Mark," she said, her voice cold and clinical. "You can leave quietly or make it messy. Your choice." Her tone was so matter-of-fact, so rehearsed, like she'd practiced this speech in the mirror. Maybe she had. Maybe they both had. Maybe they'd been planning this moment for weeks while I worked late at the office, building the life that funded everything she touched. I stared at her, at the woman I'd married 8 years ago, the woman I'd promised to love and protect, the woman I'd built an entire world around. Then I looked at him, at this stranger drinking my coffee in my robe in my kitchen. And then I did something neither of them expected. I smiled, not a big smile, not theatrical or manic, just a small, quiet curve of the lips. The kind of smile you give when you finally understand the punchline of a joke you missed the first time. "All right," I said softly, almost gently. I turned on my heel, walked back through the hallway I'd painted last summer, past the photos on the wall of our wedding day and vacations to places I'd paid for, and grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. I didn't slam anything, didn't shout, didn't sweep the coffee mugs off the counter or punch a hole in the drywall. I just left. As I walked to my car, the Mercedes I'd worked 80-hour weeks to afford, I heard Leah laugh inside. A short, sharp sound, victorious, like she'd just won a chess match I hadn't known we were playing. I sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, engine idling. And in that moment, staring at the house I'd bought, at the door I'd chosen, at the life I'd built brick by brick, I realized something profound. They had absolutely no idea what kind of man they were talking to. I drove to my office in complete silence. No music, no podcast, no news radio, just the hum of the engine and the rhythm of my own thoughts churning like gears in a machine. Leah thought she'd won. I could see it in her face, that smug, self-satisfied look, the way she'd leaned back in her chair like she'd just closed the business deal of her life, the way she'd delivered her ultimatum without a tremor in her voice. She thought betrayal was power. She thought catching me off guard meant she held all the cards. But here's the thing about power that most people don't understand. It's not about who shouts the loudest or who makes the boldest move or who has the most confidence in the moment. Real power is about who controls the foundation, and I'd built hers myself, every square inch of it. Let me explain how this happened, how we got here. Leah and I met 9 years ago at a charity gala, one of those rubber chicken dinner events where local businesses pretend to care about causes while networking and drinking overpriced wine. I'd been there representing my company. She'd been there with friends, wearing a dress that probably cost half her monthly salary. We hit it off immediately. She was funny, quick-witted, ambitious. She told me about her dreams of opening her own boutique, about escaping the soul-crushing monotony of retail management, about building something that was hers. I admired that. I'd built my own business from nothing. Started in my garage with a laptop and a dream, turned it into a multi-million-dollar consulting firm. I understood ambition. I respected hustle. We got married a year later. Small wedding, intimate, just family and close friends. She cried during her vows. Told me I was her rock, her foundation, her future. I meant mine, too. The first few years were good. Better than good. We were partners, a team. I worked long hours building the business, and she supported me, encouraged me, celebrated every win and commiserated every loss. Then, about 4 years in, she started talking seriously about the boutique again. I didn't hesitate. I wrote a check for $50,000, startup capital. I connected her with commercial real estate agents, helped her negotiate a lease on a prime downtown location, connected her with vendors through my business network, co-signed everything because her credit wasn't strong enough to stand alone. The boutique opened 2 years ago, small, curated, upscale. She called it Leah's, not ours, just hers. I didn't mind. I was proud of her. What she didn't know, what I never bothered to explain because it seemed unnecessary at the time, was that I owned the building. I'd bought it through one of my LLCs 3 years earlier as an investment property. When her real estate agent showed her the space, she fell in love with it. I made sure the property management company offered her favorable terms. She thought she was dealing with some faceless corporation. She had no idea her landlord ate breakfast across from her every morning. The house? I bought it outright in 2019 with cash from a particularly good year. We'd been married 4 years by then. She picked the furniture, chose the paint colors, designed the layout, but the deed was in my name, sole ownership. My attorney had advised it for tax and liability purposes. Keep business assets separate from personal assets, he'd said. Protect yourself. At the time, I'd thought he was being paranoid. Now I understood he was being smart. The cars? Both leased through my company. The Range Rover she loved, with the cream leather interior and the panoramic sunroof. The Audi I barely drove because I preferred my Mercedes. Both under my name, both listed as company vehicles for tax purposes. Her credit cards? She was an authorized user on my accounts. Every purchase she made, every swipe, every online order, all tied back to me. Her lifestyle? Subsidized entirely by my income. The vacations to Bali and Barcelona, the spa days, the designer handbags, the wine she liked that cost $40 a bottle, the organic groceries, the yoga studio membership, all of it. Me. She thought she was independent. She thought she'd built something. She told her friends she was a successful businesswoman, posted about Yasher Boss Life and Tiar Girl Boss on Instagram. But every brick in her empire had my name stamped on it. And now she'd invited a stranger into my kitchen, draped him in my robe, and told me to accept the new arrangement. I pulled into the parking garage beneath my office building, the building I owned, another investment property, and sat there for a long moment, engine off, staring at the concrete wall in front of me. My phone buzzed, a text from my assistant reminding me about the 9 o'clock meeting. I ignored it. Instead, I sat there and felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Anger is hot and impulsive and clouds judgment. This was colder, clearer, clarity. I'd spent 8 years building a life for someone who'd just thrown it in my face. I'd worked myself half to death creating comfort and security and opportunity for a woman who'd repaid me by letting another man sleep in our bed. Well, if she wanted a new arrangement, I'd give her one. Revenge doesn't require anger. It doesn't require screaming or breaking things or making threats. It just requires signatures. I didn't waste a single minute. The moment I got to my office, corner suite, 20th floor, view of the entire city, I closed the door, opened my laptop, and started making calls. First call, my attorney, David Chen. We'd worked together for 7 years. He'd handled my business contracts, my real estate acquisitions, my estate planning. Sharp as a scalpel and twice as precise. 6 months ago, when I first noticed Leah pulling away, the late nights, the sudden interest in her appearance, the way she'd started password protecting her phone, I'd consulted with David about protecting my assets, just in case. Paranoid, I'd asked him. Prepared, he'd corrected. Now I was grateful for his foresight. David, I said when he picked up, it's time. There was a pause. Then, she made her move? This morning, him in my kitchen, in my bathrobe. Jesus, all right? You sure you want to do this? Positive. Okay, give me 2 hours. I'll have the paperwork ready. Second call, my accountant, Nina Rodriguez. She'd managed my business finances and personal portfolio since I started the company. Brilliant with numbers, ruthless with inefficiency. Nina, I need you to freeze the joint accounts, all of them, effective immediately. I heard typing on the other end. Done. She'll lose access within the hour. Anything else? Revoke Leah's authorization on all credit accounts. Cancel her cards. Consider it done. Also, I need you to close the line of credit tied to the boutique, the one I co-signed. More typing. That's going to trigger a default notice to her. The lease payments auto-draft from that account. Perfect. Nina paused. Mark, are you sure? This is going to collapse her business? I'm aware. All right. Your call. I'll process everything today. Third call. The dealership where I leased both vehicles through my company. I'd been working with the same sales manager, Tom, for 5 years. Good relationship. I spent a lot of money there. Tom, it's Mark Holloway. I need to discuss the 2 vehicles under my corporate lease. Sure thing, Mark. What's going on? I'm requesting immediate return of both vehicles, the Range Rover and the Audi. Oh, is there a problem with them? No, personal matter. I need them returned by end of business tomorrow. Tomorrow? That's pretty fast. We'd normally give you a week, too. I'm the leaseholder, correct? Yes, but... And the contract allows me to terminate with 24 hours' notice, correct? A sigh. Technically, yes. Then I'm exercising that option. Can you arrange pickup? We'll send a tow service tomorrow morning. 8 a.m.? Perfect. Thank you, Tom. Fourth call, the property management company that handled my commercial building, the one where Leah's boutique operated. This is Mark Holloway. I own the building at 428 Central Avenue. I need to discuss Unit 12B. Of course, Mr. Holloway. What can we do for you? I'm terminating the lease on that unit. Effective immediately. Oh, that's unusual. Is there a problem with the tenant? Personal matter. Please send the formal 30-day notice today. Will do, though I should mention they're current on rent. Legally, they have 30 days to vacate. I understand. Send the notice anyway. By the time the sun set that first day, the groundwork was completely laid. I didn't text Leah, didn't call, didn't send a dramatic email or leave a note on the counter. I just worked, methodically, precisely, like I was executing a business plan. Because in a way, I was. That night, I stayed at a hotel. Not because I couldn't go home, it was my house, but because I wanted to give them rope. Let them settle in, let them feel comfortable, let them think they'd actually won something. I ordered room service, steak, good wine, sat by the window overlooking the city, and planned day 2. Day 2 started at 5:30 in the morning. I called a locksmith I'd found through a security contractor I knew, explained the situation vaguely. Mentioned it was my house, my property, my right to change the locks. Can you be there at 7 a.m.? I asked. Sure thing. At 7:15, while Leah and her boyfriend were presumably still asleep in my bed, a locksmith was installing new deadbolts on every exterior door. Front door, back door, garage, even the side gate. I'd given him explicit instructions. If anyone shows up while you're working, tell them the owner authorized the work. Don't engage beyond that. By 8:30, the house was secured. New locks, new codes, new everything. Next, I contacted every utility company: electric, gas, water, internet, cable. I need to transfer these accounts into my name only and remove the secondary account holder. Some required paperwork. Some accepted verbal authorization since I was the primary account holder. By noon, Leah's name was scrubbed from every utility in the house. Then I visited the boutique. I parked across the street and watched for a moment. Through the window, I could see her assistant manager, Riley, helping a customer. Young woman, early 20s, working her way through college, if I remembered correctly. I walked in. Riley looked up and smiled, then faltered when she saw my expression. "Mr. Holloway, hi, Leah's not here today." "I know. Can we talk in the back?" Her smile faded. Sure." In the small office behind the sales floor, I explained the situation as professionally as I could. "Riley, I want you to know this has nothing to do with you or your work. You've been excellent. But the store is closing, the lease is being terminated, and operations will cease by the end of next week." Her face went pale. "Closing, but we just had our best month." "I understand. I'm sorry. I'll pay you 2 weeks severance. Full pay. I'll also provide references for your next position." "Does Leah know?" "She will soon." I spent the next hour contacting the other 2 part-time employees. Had the same conversation, paid everyone severance out of my personal account. Made sure they understood this wasn't their fault. By the time I left the boutique, it was late afternoon. I'd dismantled Leah's business in less than 6 hours. That evening, I met with David at his office. He slid a folder across the desk. "Separation agreement. Everything's airtight. House is yours. Cars are yours. Business assets are yours. She's entitled to nothing unless she can prove commingled assets, which she can't because you kept everything properly separated. And if she fights it, she can try, but she'd need a retainer of at least $20,000 to hire someone competent enough to even review this. And since you've frozen her access to funds," he shrugged, "she's got no ammunition." "What about her claiming spousal support?" "Possible, but unlikely to succeed. You'd argue she had access to income through the boutique, which was funded by you. She's been living above her means on your dime. No judge is going to award her a lifestyle she never independently earned." I signed everything. Day 3 was the quietest. I spent most of it at the house. My house. Walking through rooms that suddenly felt different. Lighter somehow. I packed up Leah's things, clothes, shoes, jewelry, photos, everything, put them in boxes and hired a storage company to pick them up and hold them for 30 days. I didn't throw anything away, didn't destroy anything out of spite, just removed her presence from my space. By evening, the house was mine again. I sat in the living room with a glass of bourbon and waited, because I knew what was coming. It happened Friday evening, just after 6. I was sitting in my home office reviewing some contracts for an upcoming deal when my phone started buzzing. Once, twice, 3 times. Leah. I glanced at the screen. Let it ring. Watched it go to voicemail. 10 seconds later, it buzzed again. I ignored it. By 6:15, my phone had exploded. 27 missed calls, 14 texts, 3 voicemails. I poured myself another bourbon and listened to the first voicemail. "Mark, what the hell did you do? Call me back right now. I swear to God if you don't." I deleted it. The texts were even better. "What did you do to the accounts?" "Mark, answer your phone. This isn't funny. Where are the cars? Mark, you can't do this. Call me now." I didn't respond to a single one. Instead, I took a slow sip of bourbon and imagined what the last 2 days must have been like for her. Here's what I later pieced together. After I left Thursday morning, Leah and Derek, that was his name, Derek somebody, I never bothered learning his last name, had celebrated. They'd packed a bag and checked into a nice hotel downtown. The Monarch, 5 stars, rooftop bar, probably charged it to what they thought was our credit card. They'd ordered champagne, laughed about how easily I'd folded, how I'd just walked away without a fight. Derek had probably felt like a hero, the guy who swooped in and claimed the prize. Leah had probably felt powerful, liberated, finally free from a marriage she'd clearly checked out of months ago. They'd spent Thursday night living it up, dinner, drinks, whatever else. Friday morning, Derek went down to the parking garage to get the car, my Audi, and it was gone. Not stolen, towed. He'd called Leah, confused. She'd come down. They'd searched the entire garage. Nothing. She'd called the hotel. "Did you tow a silver Audi from the garage?" "No, ma'am. Are you sure you parked it here?" She'd called the police. Filed a report. My car was stolen. The officer had taken the information, then asked, "Who's the registered owner?" "My husband." "Have you asked him about it?" That's when the first crack appeared. She'd tried calling me, no answer. She'd called the dealership, furious, demanding answers. Tom, the sales manager, had calmly explained, "The vehicle is leased under Mark Holloway's name. He requested its return. We picked it up yesterday morning per his authorization." "That's my car." "Respectfully, ma'am, it's his lease. We don't have any record of you as an authorized driver." She'd hung up, tried to process, realized the Range Rover was probably gone too. It was. Towed from the house Thursday morning while they were at the hotel. Then she'd tried to buy breakfast, pulled out her credit card, declined, tried another, declined. She'd opened her banking app right there in the hotel restaurant with Derek watching and seen it. 0 balance, access revoked. I imagine the panic that must have set in, the cold realization creeping up her spine. They'd rushed back to the house, took an Uber because they had no cars, probably spent the last of Derek's cash. That's when they found the locks changed. Leah had tried her key, once, twice, 20 times, jiggling the handle like maybe she was doing it wrong. Nothing. She'd pounded on the door, screamed my name, tried to peer through windows. The neighbors probably watched, Mrs. Chen from next door, the Johnsons across the street, all of them witnessing the spectacle. Derek, to his credit, tried to stay calm at first, probably told her to breathe, to think, to call a lawyer. But as the scope of the situation became clear, I imagine his expression changed. He'd thought he was getting a successful, independent woman, a woman with means, a woman who owned things. Instead, he'd gotten a woman living on borrowed wealth, a woman with nothing in her name, a woman who just lost everything in 72 hours. That evening, Leah finally got a lawyer on the phone. Free consultation, probably found someone through Google. She'd explained the situation, the locks, the cars, the accounts, and the lawyer. I imagine him sitting in his office, listening, already knowing how this would end, had told her the truth. "Everything is in his name?" "Yes, but I'm his wife." "That doesn't matter. Legally, if the deed is in his name, the house is his. If the lease is in his name, the cars are his. If the accounts are his, the money is his." "But we're married." "Are you filing for divorce?" I don't know." "Well, if you do, you can fight for equitable distribution of assets. But that takes time, months, maybe years. And you'd need a retainer of at least $15,000 to $20,000 for me to take your case." "I don't have that." "Then I can't help you." I imagine the silence that followed, the sound of her entire world collapsing. By Saturday morning, Derek was gone. No dramatic confrontation, no apologies. He just slipped out early, probably called an Uber, and disappeared. Because he hadn't signed up for this. He'd wanted the fantasy, the easy win, the successful woman with the nice house and the nice cars and the nice life. He didn't want the reality, a woman with nothing, nowhere to go, and a very angry husband who held all the cards. Leah had texted me again Saturday afternoon. "Derek's gone. Please, we need to talk." I'd deleted it. A week later, I sat in a quiet cafe on the edge of town. It was the kind of place I used to take Leah to on Sunday mornings, back when things were good, before the distance, before the lies, before the stranger in my robe. The cafe had exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture and a chalkboard menu written in unnecessarily artistic handwriting. It smelled like fresh bread and espresso and simpler times. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, watching people walk by, couples holding hands, parents pushing strollers, teenagers laughing at something on their phones, people living their lives, unaware of the small wars happening behind closed doors. My phone sat on the table, face down. Leah had stopped calling as frequently, but the messages still came. Texts, emails, even a handwritten letter delivered to my office. All of them variations on the same themes: anger, bargaining, desperation, and occasionally something that looked like remorse. "You destroyed everything." "How could you do this to me?" "I made a mistake. Please, Mark, I have nowhere to go." I hadn't responded to any of them, not out of cruelty, not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say. She'd made her choice. She'd sat across from another man in my home and told me to accept the new arrangement. She'd celebrated my departure. She'd thought she'd won, and I'd simply reminded her who built the board she was playing on. David had called me earlier in the week to tell me she'd hired a lawyer, some bottom-tier attorney who worked out of a strip mall. "He's threatening to file for divorce and go after your assets," David had said. "Let him." "Mark, he's incompetent. He doesn't even realize you have a prenup. We have a prenup? No, but he hasn't checked. He's billing her hourly and stalling. She's going to run out of money before this even gets to court. Good. The truth is, I didn't want to destroy Leah. I never had. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the disrespect and the sheer audacity of what she'd done, I didn't hate her. I just refused to be her safety net anymore. For 8 years, I'd built a life around her. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, creating comfort and security. I'd funded her dreams and supported her ambitions and never once asked for anything in return except loyalty. And she'd thrown it away for some random guy who bolted the second the money dried up. That wasn't hate, that was clarity. I took a sip of coffee and stared out the window at the city I'd built my business in. The city where I'd carved out a life, where I'd succeeded and failed and gotten back up and succeeded again. This was my city, my life, my foundation. And Leah, she'd been a tenant, a guest in a world I'd created. My phone buzzed, a text from my brother. "You good?" I replied. "Yeah, better than I've been in a long time." He sent back a thumbs-up emoji. I finished my coffee, left cash on the table, overly generous tip because the barista had been kind, and walked out into the cool morning air. Life would go on, business would continue, new deals would close, new opportunities would emerge, and eventually, maybe I'd meet someone new, someone who understood partnership, someone who built alongside me instead of just living off what I'd built. But for now, I was content with silence, with clarity, with the simple truth that I'd reclaimed my life from someone who'd tried to take it without asking.